I had a couple years as well in just before high school. I was bullied as well, and people that I've spoken to and met over the years that we exchange these stories of bullying, like these things really stay with you. I remember there was one kid during one specific, probably the worst element of the bullying that I had during those times, and it was years later. It must have been 15, if not 20 years later, and I saw either on Facebook or, and I don't think I've ever told anyone this, but I was like either on Facebook or in the paper or whatever, my local town in Canada, that this kid had died from cancer like years later. And my first thought was, good, fuck that guy. And like, I didn't feel proud of that thought, but you can't help your thoughts. Like
No, you can't.
afterwards, I had to like almost make amends with that thought to be like, yeah, I'm sure that must have been awful for his friends and his family. But I kind of just accepted like, yeah, but that's how I feel. It's not my job to mourn this person. And and this isn't like, we're all kids at the time when we were 12 years old or whatever. Who knows what family he came from? And I've learned to have a lot of empathy for these sorts of forgivable, or like, how do you say, these people that need to be forgiven, these moments that need to be forgiven. I've worked a lot of that in my life, but I really liked your, like these tens, like this forgiveness is for you. And
Yep.
some things are just not forgivable, which I think there's a little bit too much of. It's kind of like trying to blood from a stone sort of thing. Like we're trying to do something that we should just accept is not happening. So maybe with those tens, do you just say like, just leave those and move on to the nines?
Yeah, you do. You leave the tens for last. Start with the ones
Right.
and go all the way through your list with the people, places, and things. And I'm going to talk about the places and things because that's probably catching a few people. And the tens, by the time you get to the tens, you'll be sort of ready. It might take some mental gymnastics, but depending upon the severity, you might be ready to forgive your tens. It took me years to forgive my parents. Years. And you can make the first round and you check your emotions after you do the mantra. And if you're still mad, well, wait 24 hours and then come back to it.
Right.
Forgiveness is like an onion and you have to kind of peel down the layers. And sometimes you can get a 10 down to an 8, still not forgivable. You can take the 8 and maybe you can move it all the way down. My number 10, one of my number 10s, because you can have multiple 10s, multiple 7s, multiple 1s, but one of my 10s, I think I've gotten down to a 5.
Wow. That's monumental work.
But some people can forgive very easily. And then you get mad at yourself. You think, well, I should be able to forgive this person. What's wrong with me? There's nothing wrong with you.
Right.
What they did was unforgivable. You're completely human. You don't have to forgive them. In fact, the one person you should forgive is yourself. Forgiving yourself for having that thought about that young man who died of cancer. And we've all had those thoughts about our bullies. I've seen my bullies' names and I look at them and in my head, I'm from New York City originally. And in my head, it goes a little dark and I look at it and say, wouldn't it be great if they were, insert your most horrible situation here.
Toss them in front of one of those New York City subways.
Yeah. Maybe they got arrested. Well, good for you.
Yeah.
It's not a pretty thought, but it's normal. Everybody does it.
Yeah.
But then once you have the thought, you kind of pull back and you think, well, maybe, yourself is probably the hardest person to forgive.
Well, I think it kind of compounds the problem. Like if you can't forgive someone and then you beat yourself up, then you feel bad about that. And then it seems like maybe a cascading sort of situation that's going to take you further away from being able to forgive people. I mean, there's one person in my life, for example, that like I've worked really hard to understand who they are and forgive them because I wanted to maintain a relationship. And at one point a few years ago, we were having this conversation and they were saying to me like, you know what, you just hold grudges. And like, luckily I was in my best self in that moment, in that day, whereas other times maybe not. But I remember saying that like, I go, if I held a grudge, you and I would have zero relationship. Like we wouldn't even be talking. So it's not because of anything you've done. And you could see like the truth wash over that person. And it seems that there has been movement since such a conversation. But I think it speaks to what you're saying, that like it comes from us. Like I think if someone on that forgivable list or needs forgiveness list comes forward to make amends, like that's best case scenario. But I don't think that's maybe 1% of cases, maybe. Like it seems very unlikely that these things are going to happen.